Welcome to Brampton Focus. Well, with the current publication of the Auditor General's report, which was not very good news, and Kathleen Wynne trying to sell 60% of Hydro One, the press has been relatively hard on our current provincial Liberal government. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Next on Brampton Focus, we meet Todd Smith. He is the current provincial critic for the Conservatives of the Hydro One deal, and he's next on Brampton Focus. And welcome back to Brampton Focus. He's an MPP, Minister of Provincial Parliament, and he's from the Prince Edward Hastings area. That's around Belleville. And when you talk about one of the hottest topics that is currently in the news, it's all about hydro. And this is the gentleman who is a staunch critic of our Liberal government's hydro, the sale of our hydro. His name is Todd Smith, and he's an MPP. Todd, thank you so much for joining us on Brampton Focus.
Good to be here, Michael.
As of late, CUPE decided, the Canadian Union of Public Employees decided to sue our government. They decided to actually, the Attorney General, they filed with him, Kathleen Wynne, Charles Sousa, and Bob Shirelli, because they said the sale of Ontario Hydro, which they've already sold about 30%, is wrong. You're a staunch critic. You're representing those people who feel that it is something that we need to keep for Ontario. What's happening?
They're selling off Hydro One. It doesn't matter what the public says. It doesn't matter what the Financial Accountability Officer says. It doesn't matter what the polls say. It just seems like this government is going down the wrong path and selling off Hydro One shares. As you say, they've already sold off 30%. It's happened in 15% tranches that they've sold off on two different occasions. They've slowed down a little bit on the sale, and I don't know if that's because of the pressure that's coming from officers of the legislature or from public opinion polls or from members of the official opposition and the third party. But
your leader, Patrick Brown, who's also come on this program, as well as Andrea Horwath from the NDP, are vehemently speaking in the media and saying this is wrong. They've sold 30%. They've got about $9 billion. They're trying to raise another $9 billion to sell another 30, which means that the people of Ontario will be out 60% of our hydro, of our ownership. Where is the sense to pay today instead of making hundreds of millions of dollars every year from something that keeps returning? It's like an annuity.
Exactly, and that's what the official officers are saying in the legislature, like the Financial Accountability Officer. What they're saying is this is short-term gain, but long-term pain for the province of Ontario, because as you say, it is returning a steady, reliable revenue. I think when it comes right down to the Hydro One sale, it doesn't have as much to do about getting their hands on the money, although we know that the Liberals love to get their hands on the money and spend the money without much accountability, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the lack of accountability that goes with
the
spending.
Have done that too. I mean, the Liberals aren't here to defend themselves, and I'm neither here nor there, but governments, like, there's something sometimes like drunken sailors, because they're holding our money, the taxpayers' money. But I just want to get to the point of where the logic is from any business person to sell 60% of something, which is continuing a revenue-generating stream, which underwrites all the things that we as Ontarians and Canadians hold dear, our highways, our hospitals, and all these other elements. Like, where is the sense in this?
Well, I think, as I was going to say, I think it has more to do with the fact that Hydro One is a mess. Hydro One clearly is a mess. The Ombudsman, before he didn't have his contract renewed, Andre Morin, had 10,600 complaints about Hydro One billing to his office. That's the largest amount any Ombudsman has ever had when it comes to complaints on any one issue. So it was becoming a nightmare for the government to deal with Hydro One because it wasn't being run very efficiently or effectively. People were getting overbilled by thousands of dollars on their monthly hydro bills. I think what they decided to do was sell off Hydro One. We're going to get rid of the problem instead of actually doing the hard work and dealing with trying to fix Hydro One to make it even more effective. It's returning a steady stream of millions of dollars every year.
Hundreds of millions.
It could have returned a heck of a lot more had it been run properly. So I think instead of doing the hard and heavy lifting, they decided we got to get rid of this problem. At the same time, they want to get their hands on the money so that they can allegedly build infrastructure here in the GTA.
Oh, wait a second. I mean, that's a great thing to talk about. I love infrastructure is like passing wind in an elevator. You know someone did it. It's there. You can't hold it and see it, but you can sure smell it. I mean, if you look at, like, Ontario is the most indebted non-sovereign nation in the world. And this whole thing about spending infrastructure, I mean, that's a great keyword. But we are in debt. We need to have something that's going to continue returning an investment to it. I mean, is this not a form of social engineering?
When you talk about spending like drunken sailors, you used that analogy earlier, and you talk about debt, and you talk about where the province's debt has gone over this last 13 years that the Liberals have been in power. I mean, they've doubled the province's debt. It took over 120 years for the province to accumulate the debt that it had. Well, it took only 13 years for this Liberal government to double that. So there needs to be some accountability. There needs to be some responsibility when it comes to taxpayer dollars. They want to get their hands on the money wherever they can. They're selling off LCBO property in downtown Toronto. They're selling off other public assets.
That's real estate.
But clearly the Hydro One sale is something that's returning on a regular basis, as we've mentioned a couple of different times. Instead of fixing it and making it run more efficiently, to return more money to the province for projects like infrastructure, which we're going to continue have to try and fund these projects down the road. I mean, you're only going to get the opportunity to sell Hydro One once, and then it's gone. You can't sell it again. At the same time, you're not fixing your structural deficit problems that you have in Ontario. So we're going to be right back into building that debt even larger.
So you're the hydro critic. You're a member of the Conservatives under the leadership of Patrick Brown. So you're basically front and center to be able to challenge us. You represent Prince Edward County. You're in the Belleville area. Mm-hmm. How hard is it for you, with about 2 minutes left, unfortunately, in this segment, to be able to make a point to get some of these people to sit up and listen, and to get the press and the people who are watching and listening and reading to acknowledge that this has to be stopped. This is the wrong way to go.
Yeah, it's been difficult. However, and the government hasn't backed off on the continued sale of Hydro One yet, but it has been difficult. And my colleagues in the third party, the NDP, have been banging away at this as well, trying to get the government to walk away from this short-sighted move. Much of my region is powered or receives its electricity via Hydro One. Right. So there are 70% of the constituents in my riding that get a bill every month from Hydro One. Most of rural Ontario gets its electricity via Hydro One. Right. Hydro One wasn't working well. It clearly wasn't, and we've been talking about that for 6 or 7 years or more. It took an election loss in Scarborough Rouge River in a Liberal stronghold riding to really get the attention of Premier Kathleen Wynne and the Energy Minister that electricity is out of control. They've got to do something about it, and selling off Hydro One isn't the right way to do it.
Yeah, I think it is a train that keeps moving, or a snowball that keeps rolling and gaining speed. I hope, Todd, that you don't give up your fight and continue to talk about this, because I think this is an issue that's going to affect generations of Ontarians. So we've done the hydro thing. When we come back, it's been 14 years that they've been trying to do this. They spent $8 billion, and it's called e-health. I mean, can you imagine? The Auditor General released a report. When we come back, we continue our discussion with Todd Smith, and we talk about the Auditor General's report right here on Brampton Focus. My name is Michael Charbon. Stay with us. Welcome back to Brampton Focus, our second segment. We're here with Todd Smith, who is the Prince Edward County Representative, Minister of Provincial Parliament, and is the critic for the hydro as well. He does natural resources as well. And we had a very spirited conversation, I think, in the first segment about the wonderful Wynne government selling off Hydro One. But worse than that, Todd, as I teased in our last segment, $8 billion, 14 years, e-health. We had the Auditor General's report, and if that was a report card, not only would it have gained a fail, you would have been expelled.
You would think so.
What the heck are they doing with our money?
You would think so. $8 billion. That would build a lot of Brampton hospitals. That would build a lot of hospitals across the province and pay for doctors and nurses and personal support workers to work in them.
And they still don't have their ship together.
No, they don't. He did say that with a P. The interesting thing about it is there's really no plan, and there's no ceiling as to how much this project is going to cost. So they've had free rein now for 14 years to try and get this done, and clearly the medical records still aren't getting to where they need to go. So in this amount of time, Apple has put out, what, 7 different iPhone S's or whatever they are? Yeah. How many things has BlackBerry put out? But eHealth can't get the records transferred between hospitals in Brampton and Mississauga. It just doesn't make any sense. It boggles the mind. And it's been riddled with scandal too. So not only is there the waste and mismanagement that's clearly evident there, but there's been scandal around this as well, where employees who were working for eHealth to try and make this happen, and you might remember this from a few years ago, that were making $1,000 a day, and they were still putting in receipts for $1.50 for a tea from Tim Hortons. So I mean, these are the kinds of things that really aggravate people, and these are the kinds of things that haven't stopped under the Wynne government.
You know, to borrow a phrase, we should drain the swamp, as they would say. I can't believe this is going. They talked about asphalt, where a substandard asphalt was being used to pave certain roads, our infrastructure expenditure, and then months after that, we have these huge potholes that we're having to pay to have refilled, and then the government gives up bonuses. Like, where is the common sense of regular business? If you supplied me with something and it was substandard, first of all, you'd have a difficult time collecting the remainder of your fee until it was fixed. And if after that it wasn't working, why are we standing for all this? Why does it take an Auditor's General report to embarrass everybody to get something done?
And not only is it embarrassing, but it's a complete waste of money too. So you know, you've got asphalt that's supposed to be at a certain standard. Mm-hmm. They're not using the asphalt that is of a certain standard. They're using a lower grade of asphalt. So for instance, one of the examples that the auditor used was the 403, which runs through the Peel region. Yep. The pavement on that highway was supposed to last 15 years, right, but it started to crack 2 years, 3 years in, because they weren't using the asphalt, the pavement that they said they were going to use. They used a lower grade of pavement. So it cost $23 million to repave that after 3 years. Now, they've done that all across the province. And not only are they doing that, but they're getting bonuses for completing the projects,
so
which were substandard.
Where the hell is the bell, Todd? Where's the ding, 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 ding? I mean... Yeah,
it's almost criminal what's going on here. It's just a complete waste. In the private sector, you would never get rewarded. You would get demoted. You'd be gone. We wouldn't use you again. I mean, there's the example of the pedestrian bridge, and you probably heard about that over in Pickering, where they put the bridge trusses in upside down.
But the one thing was that an engineer, it's been stated that an engineer proved, and regardless which side, you could call it upside down, but from an engineer's standpoint, the structure and the how would you say, the rigidity and the technical architectural execution, one way or the other is still okay. But fundamentally, they put it upside down.
Yes, they put it in upside down. The company made a mistake. They did it wrong. The same company got hired to do the next job, to put the plate glass windows in, and they messed that up too. So these kinds of things are happening all the time under this government. And instead of being penalized, put in the penalty box, they're getting rewarded with new contracts, and then they're getting bonuses on top of that of $600,000.
So you talk a good talk, Todd. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. You're a strong-willed man. I can see how you would translate, and they picked the right guy as far as you got the voice, you got the pipes, former radio guy. What would you do differently if you were given the keys and we drained the swamp and we filled it up with fresh water? What would you do from an infrastructure standpoint to mediate and remedy some of this stuff?
Worry more about the taxpayers' dollars than getting reelected, trying to manage what's happening.
I'm sorry, I gotta laugh. From a politician to say that? Come on, dude.
No, but I mean, it is...
I loved you up until that point.
It is true, though. I mean, there needs to be some oversight on these projects, and clearly the oversight is lacking. I think you need the direction right from the top, from the Premier onto the ministers on down, because if there's no one being held accountable for these mistakes that are being made, they're going to continue to be made. And that's what we're seeing in these reports. The auditor released another book that was about that thick on top of her Auditor General's report, which was that thick. And that little document was referencing all of the audits that she had done previously and the recommendations that she made to the various ministries. And very few of her recommendations have been implemented. So The Auditor General has basically been ignored by this government, and she's had a lot of her oversight powers removed as a result of moves by this government as well. So no longer is the Auditor General able to look at what's happening at Hydro One, for instance, which we were talking about off the top. She has no oversight of the Hydro One sale anymore.
So one of the things, we respect the workers, the QP workers. We respect the people who put their time and their lives in working on our behalf. But one would say that there are certain pay scales that supersede what conventional business would pay. Do you think, Todd, that it's time to implement a certain level of ceiling pay for someone who works for the province of Ontario? Because some of these fees and some of the things that we see that is coming from our tax money,
right,
it's a little offside.
Well, it's really offside, and let's go back to the Hydro One sale. They just hired a new president and CEO at Hydro One for $4 million a year. The CEO at Hydro Quebec, who, by the way, is doing a much better job than Hydro One is doing at providing low-cost electricity effectively and efficiently, gets paid about $480,000 a year, which still sounds like a lot of money. That's still a lot of money, but $4 million for the president of Hydro One?
We've seen that before in certain games that have come here and certain things that have happened. We saw pay scales and stuff happening, which was totally offside. We're speaking to Mr. Todd Smith. He is the Hydro One critic. He's a Minister of Parliament for Prince Edward Hastings. And in our final segment, we're going to kind of freelance a little bit. There's some issues. You just got a $13.5 million infrastructure grant for your region, so things are going to come through for you, and we want to use the crystal ball and see what's going to happen if an election comes up shortly with regards to Patrick Brown and the Conservatives. My name is Michael A. Charbon. You're watching Brampton Focus. Stay tuned for our final segment with Todd Smith. Welcome back to Brampton Focus, our final segment. We're sitting down with Mr. Todd Smith, who is the Minister of Provincial Parliament for Prince Edward Hastings, and he's also the critic for Hydro One sale, which we had a spirited conversation. I suspect, Todd, we're going to get some reactions on BramptonFocus.ca, because the people who watch this program, the people who live in the Peel region, feel very strongly about this. I want to talk a little bit about your leader, Patrick Brown. We had the opportunity to have Patrick in our studios. I spent a half an hour with them, engaging gentlemen, leading a party that's going to have a lot of responsibility in 2018. With what we've talked about, with what we've seen, and some of the increasing deficits, there is an appetite, I would think, potentially for change, and a Conservative wave is going all over North America. What do you see as some of the crucial and salient points that Patrick Brown has to communicate and sell to people, particularly in the Peel region, but in Ontario, to get himself elected?
Right. Well, clearly the biggest issue that I'm hearing is energy, and specifically electricity. So every time that I talk to somebody, whether it's in Brampton, Mississauga, or in Belleville or Prince Edward County, they're talking to me about their latest electricity bill. In a lot of cases, those bills have doubled over the last 5 years, and they're unmanageable for a lot of people. I think it's just started to penetrate here into the Peel region. This has been a big issue in Eastern Ontario and rural and Northern Ontario for 5 or 6 years. The electricity bills have started to go up. We're now seeing it here in the Peel region and in the GTA, where it's becoming a very, very important issue. Our party's been working hard to develop energy policy going forward. It's not going to include another tax like the cap and trade, which the Auditor General was very, very critical of in her report as well. That money is not going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Ontario. It's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in California, and we're going to send a lot of our money to California. So we need to develop an electricity and an energy policy that's going to help people, because it's getting more and more expensive to live here in Ontario, and we're becoming more and more less uncompetitive, I guess you would say, as a jurisdiction in comparison to our neighbors in Quebec and Manitoba and south of the border in Ohio and New York and Pennsylvania. So we have to make sure that we're keeping our jobs here as well. So that's another issue that Patrick is talking about an awful lot, is making sure that we have jobs in Ontario. There are too many people without a job, and we're not training people or educating people for the jobs of the future in Ontario. So he links part of his 4 pillars of success for Ontario Ontario to education and energy.
So here in Brampton Focus, we've been fortunate enough to talk about a new hospital that's being built here. We just announced recently the establishment of a university. So medical, healthcare, and education are two things which are paramount in the minds of many constituents, particularly in Brampton. How do you see those two subjects fitting into the platform of the Conservatives if they were given the helm, as one would say, to lead us into the next phase?
They're the two most important things that I hear about after energy these days, or electricity these days: healthcare and education, because they're both seeing cuts. They're both seeing the quality of the product or the programs being cut. And hurting. So whether it's special education in our schools, we're seeing educational assistants, early childhood educators, those personal support workers in healthcare aren't available. The frontline healthcare workers are being cut.
Well, wait times are increasing. I mean, we saw that from the Ottawa General's report as well.
Yeah, clearly. So there needs to be a much stronger person in charge of where that ship is headed, and clearly those cuts are having an impact on frontline healthcare services and frontline education. So, and the cost of electricity, Michael, is affecting both of those things as well. When you're seeing 40% increases in the cost of electricity, that's having a huge impact on your schools and your hospitals. That's money that's being diverted out of the budget.
Manufacturing. I mean, manufacturing.
Well, huge.
There were some local manufacturers and small restaurants in the Hamilton area that were saying if they're paying $4,000 a month for their hydro bill, how many sandwiches do you have to sell to make that up?
Exactly.
I mean,
and you can't run your breakfast restaurant in the middle of the night, as the government has tried to have people do with the time of use metering. It's not working either. And then the whole smart meter boondoggle has been another waste of money. So it's clearly, if we want to have jobs in the area, we have to make sure we have the education and we're training people for the jobs that we want to see in Ontario, not these part-time jobs and precarious work that seems to be all over the place, especially here in Peel region. Good paying jobs, and we have to make sure that part of that is getting the electricity and energy under control. So, those companies aren't moving from Markham to Michigan, or from Brampton to Boca Raton, or wherever they're going, right? We want to make sure that they stay here in Ontario and employ Ontarians.
So if you look at the landscape, I mean, we have a Liberal government federally, we have a Liberal government provincially. There is some expectation that in 2018, both Patrick Brown and whomever the leader of the federal Conservatives is going to be, are going to have a responsibility to really show the people of Canada change, particularly 5 ridings here in the Brampton sector. We're just going through the process now of selecting riding candidates. Yeah. If you were going to identify several points that would really make that bell ring that conservatism and Conservatives need to acknowledge, what would it be? What would be those salient points that you think need to be communicated to the voting sector to say that Conservatives are an option?
Right. So public opinion polls right now are not in favor of the current Liberal government. You say there's that appetite for change. There certainly seems to be an appetite for change now. All of the public opinion polls say that it's time for a change of government in Ontario. How are we going to be that alternative?
Yes.
I think it's going to come down to making sure that
What would you do differently?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to come down to making sure that we have real quality candidates on the ground. And I know Patrick has been attracting a higher quality of candidate to seek these nominations in the Peel region. And we need people that are kind of modeled after Patrick with his energy. I mean, this is a guy who goes all day and all night long, from event to event to event, talking about the missteps of the Liberal government, and then talking about the things that the progressive Conservatives would do to make your life better, make your life more affordable. So we need people that are energetic, are going to go out there and do the work, because you can't just rely on the polls. You got to do the spade work.
Well, the polls sure proved themselves interesting in the American election, I'll have you say it. So with just under a minute left, is there something that you want to accomplish at Queen's Park? Is there something that you want to say that I did that? Is there one of those things?
Me personally? Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of local projects in my region which probably don't have a whole lot of impact for people in the Peel region, unless they visit Prince Edward County in the summertime, or the Quinte region in the summertime.
Beautiful area.
Well, it's a great area. area. It's a new wine region. Of course, we have Niagara down on the Golden Horseshoe, but we have the Niagara of the East region, which is a lot more affordable too. So I want to make sure that we have some good highways going through there, and we make it a really attractive place for people to come and visit and spend their vacation dollars.
Todd Smith, thank you so much for being with us. He is the representative Minister of Provincial Parliament for Prince Edward Hastings in the Belleville area. Go and see them, taste a little bit of wine, and enjoy some summertime. Todd, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Mike.
And thank you for ringing the bell on selling Hydro One. We look forward to hearing more from you. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Thanks for watching Brampton Focus. We appreciate your comments on bramptonfocus.ca. See you again soon.